Hello, welcome to our Introverted Indies discussion panel about self-publishing. We've got Katie Andrews, and TR Kavanaugh, also known as Tammy. So, would you both like to introduce yourself? Would either of you like to go first?
I'll go first. I am Katie Andrews, or Katie. So my book is Tales of Heather and Bone. It's backwards, but that's the best I could do. I have other books, but they would not all fit. So, I live in Georgia. I've been an author since 2020. A garden. I have cats. I don't know what else to say.
No, that's great. Thank you. And Tammy, would you like to introduce yourself and your books?
I'm Tammy, TR Kavanaugh. I have published so far just 2 books. This one was published in 2022, spring, I believe. And I just published this one in October of 2024. And I'm currently working on the 3rd book. I have a cat. I enjoy biking and walking and playing lots of video games.
Fantastic. I love a video game. So my name is Lydia. I'm the co-host of Introverted Indies with Lucy. I have a fantasy out, and I also have a sci-fi novel out. I don't have any cats, but I have 4 children, which is kind of the same thing. So there we go. And over to you, Lucy.
Yeah, so I'm Lucy A. McLaren, a dark fantasy author. Current books out are Awakening, The Commune's Curse Book 1, and The Madman's Hope, Commune's Curse Book 2. I've got a gothic fantasy coming out later this year called Etherstone. That's not the full title, but it's the working title. And then at some point, the 3rd book in that series, and various other dark fantasy things I'm working on currently. Yeah, and I've just kind of got into the self-publishing route this year after publishing the 1st book with a small press. So I'm interested to learn about everyone else's experiences and advice on the subject.
So shall we kick off with Katie? What made you choose self-publishing over sort of traditional publishing?
So my first fantasy series, The Assassin of Grins and Secrets, I had wanted to traditionally publish. So in college, 2017, 2018, I tried sending query letters. I wasn't getting any traction. Granted, the book needed a lot of work, which I didn't realize till after I kind of pivoted and got a developmental editor, and so she helped so much. And I'm an English major, so a lot of the stuff in writing, like we had heard people come in and talk about self-publishing in college, but I was like, that sounds very expensive, that sounds like a lot, I'm not sure like how to conceptualize like getting my own cover and everything. But like when 2019 2020 kind of rolled around, I was like, that's starting to sound a little bit better. Let's just see like what I can do with that. So I loved having control of like the cover image I had in mind. I wanted to do like a lot of interior art, and I wanted to publish kind of on my own timeline, because obviously querying, it takes a while just depending on the agent, and then the agent has to send your book out and you hope someone will want it, or put it out for a bid. So it's like, let's just do this and try it out. And then I'd actually published a little poetry book in 2020. So that was my first taste of like, here's how we do a cover, here's how we do formatting, here's how we find our own editors. So a very small scale thing, and learned a lot from that. So I could take that into like my larger book. So mostly it was just a little bit of frustration of not getting traction with querying, but then also seeing like, what am I able to do with my resources and creativity to publish the book that I want to publish.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, isn't it? Having control over all sorts of different things that you think that you're going to have more input in, or think are going to work when you've got a publisher, and then actually it's like, oh no. Because I know me and Lucy both had small press publishers, and actually I stepped away, and Lucy is in the process of trying to sort of work around that too. But actually we both wanted more control. And actually, we didn't feel that they were sort of championing our books the way they should do. And if you do it yourself, you know what works, what doesn't work. Control is a big thing.
It's a double-edged sword for sure, of like, well, now it's all on you, but also you can be a lot more creative, you can do a lot more things, and you can keep the things in the book that you would prefer to keep in the book.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about you, Tammy?
Okay, so my publishing journey, I guess it started when I found out you had to get an agent, and that was a long time ago. Back when they used to have books that you could purchase that had the agents in them. I don't think they publish those anymore. I think you do everything online now. But I looked into that. The thing holding me back from approaching anyone was that my biggest issue was not being able to finish a project. So I knew I needed to figure that out before I could move on to any other stages. And then I think in 2011 or something like that was the first time I ever heard of self-publishing. I was like, good for those guys. Still had to finish the project, so wasn't gonna go look into that. And then in 2019, a lot of life stuff and work stuff just kind of piled up, and I realized I hadn't written anything in over a year probably, which felt very wrong. And so I joined a writing group, a local writing group, and just started doing whatever it was that they were doing that day, like a prompt or whatever. And then we could have discussions about writing, and it was very exciting and everything. And then I did NaNoWriMo that year, and I just decided to pick up an old project and finish it. Like, I didn't start from the beginning, I just picked up from where I had left off and finished it. And that felt really good. And then I was like, I'm gonna rework this into like a better story. And then COVID, and that's when I kind of fell into the hole of YouTube and AuthorTube, I suppose. And there were a lot of people who were going after a regular publishing with a company, a publishing house. But then a few people started talking about self-publishing. I was like, oh yeah, that's a thing now. And the more I looked into it, it just appealed to me for self-publishing. I'm not really sure when I made the decision or what kind of like pushed me over the edge. It might have been just the amount of hoops you had to jump through just to get a book out there for people to potentially find and read, and just how long it would take, and how there was no guarantee that even if you got an agent you would get published, or that they would say no one wants this book, so write another one. Which is fine, but at the same time, like, you have this completed manuscript and it's just sitting somewhere and no one's reading it. So anyway, yeah, did the whole find an editor, find a cover designer. I met some local people who had done self-publishing, so they kind of gave me some more information and encouragement. And then the final push just to publish, and that was actually the hardest step.
So you both said what the learning about what self-publishing involves, right? And it's just because Tammy, you said about you learned about it in 2011, but it's come a long way since then.
It's changed a lot.
Because, yeah, because you know that they did. Because when did you self-published one?
So I mean, I did one 2017, and even then, I think it was self-publishing wasn't. It was looked down on a little bit potentially, whereas now I feel it's definitely not. Like, it's obviously it's of sometimes the better route for a lot of people, and you don't have to write to what is popular and what is on the wish list for agents, do you? So yeah, no, it's definitely changed since even 2017.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like a much easier route now. I don't know if that you feel like that's been the case, right? What have you learned in your self-publishing your books? Like, has it been a steep learning curve, would you say?
I would say yeah, because when I had started out, I didn't really have like the indie community. I didn't like quite know where to look. My only interactions with like a self-published book were either the really bad covers where it's like the real blocky font and some sort of clip art cover. And then I think the only self-published indie book I had read at that point was Rage of Dragons by Evan Winters before it got picked up traditionally, which I think the self-published cover was much nicer. Just throwing that out there. So I didn't quite like understand like how Amazon worked, how Barnes and Noble like press worked, and like the different margins, because I designed, like, I had gotten my cover artist and done like all the graphics and everything else myself, so the formatting was all on me, because I was like, well, let's see if we can do that. It's just following where the margins are, but then trying to understand like where are the bleed lines, what is each like press online kind of want for that. So that was kind of that learning curve. Definitely with Assassins or Crimson Secrets had setbacks of Amazon like not releasing it when I wanted it to, so understanding like the importance of like the pre-orders and pre-releases, and then also understanding like where to find good editors, because I kind of got burned by like a proofreader who didn't do really a good job. So just like those kinds of things of learning of like, okay, so we need to invest a little bit more money in this and spend a little bit more time on this, like really trying to slow the process down of like, I want to publish it when I want to publish it, but also knowing like, hey, we need to maybe hold this back a little bit longer, and not set like a release date until it's where I feel comfortable putting this out. And it's not going to be perfect, but, you know, as close to perfect as is humanly possible. So just that curve was a little bit steep with my first book or two of kind of like, oh, this is what this means. This is where, like, how to set good prices. Because I remember in the beginning I had set my ebook like super high as you can go for an indie, and I was like, that wasn't very smart because no one knows who I am. You know, I can't set it to like what traditional publishing would set their Kindle prices at, which to me is still like, why am I paying $10 for an ebook if I can't hold it? So, you know, just learning about pricing, learning about how to like market a book, and then once I found like the indie community that like really helped out of people who had been doing it a whole lot longer. And then of course, as we move through COVID of like, how do we sell a book when we can't go out and be in person, which was fine for me because I was not ready to go do like set up a table and offer people my book, which I still have not really done. It's still a little, that hurdle is the next one to go to. But yeah, so I think with each book I publish, it gets a little bit easier, but there's always something new, like with the services offered for indies is changing and it's becoming a lot more respectable. And just seeing like what's out there is really encouraging and how it stands up to traditional publishing. Sometimes you can't tell the difference that that's an indie book or a self-published book. So that's really encouraging to see.
And I think there's a lot more tools out there now, I think, for indie authors to use to be able to do things for themselves. I know that when I did 2017, there wasn't a lot, or maybe I didn't know about it, but now there are so many apps and so many things that actually it can be very straightforward.
Hi, Gabby. Okay. Well, okay, so what we'll do then is we'll let you introduce yourself, Gabby.
I'm Gabby. I'm GM Chmilar. I write fantasy books in Canada, so that's the time zone problem in Canada.
So we were just discussing, Gabby, like what made you choose self-publishing. So do you want to tell us a bit about that?
I don't really know. It kind of just happened. I wrote a book over COVID, and then I thought, you know, it'd be fun if I published it, and then I didn't have any writer friends or publishing friends, so I kind of just weaved my way around, like, the journey by myself. And then when I started Instagram and I started meeting other people, I had already decided in my mind that I wanted to do this by myself. Not like by myself, but indie publishing. But I didn't know how to go about it, and ended up going through a self-publishing company in Canada, which was a little bit disappointing because as I met more people and discovered what other indie authors were doing, I felt like I was doing it incorrectly because I didn't have enough sources. And Googling indie publishing was very difficult. There's not really like a list of things you need to do, or there wasn't a lot of insight coming off of the internet. You kind of really had to search for it. And now that I kind of know a little bit more about the industry and about other people's journeys, I'm actually relaunching my first book, and I took it off of that self-publishing company, and then I'm still deciding if I'm going through Ingram or if I want to just do Kindle Unlimited. Like, there's a lot of choices, and if there's no one to guide you, you make mistakes, and that's okay. Like, mistakes are great, and you learn from them. But I feel like there's a little bit of regret of me doing it completely alone and not waiting for someone or finding someone correctly. But it's hard if you don't know if you're looking for somebody to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that kind of goes on to our second question that Katie had just answered, but it was what have you learned in self-publishing? And for you, it seems as though it's that learning to find people who are kind of perhaps more experienced, like have that community around you, other authors who have self-published perhaps, that could have helped give a lot more information that you were struggling to find otherwise.
Yeah, I know the author community is such a massive thing. It's something that I hadn't really experienced in 2017. I also had a 6-month-old at the time, so it wasn't really my best time. But now, like, I've met Lucy, I've met loads of other people, and through doing this, and yet the author community is so positive and encouraging. And if you've got a problem, you can just ask, and often you get a million answers and lots of helpful things, and people want to read your book and edit and do, anything. So no, that's an important part, I think, of self-publishing.
What about you, Tammy? What have you learned from self-publishing?
So I guess my stumbling bits were learning how to find a cover artist was the biggest one, I feel like. I did approach a few different cover artists. I learned that I don't like the ones that don't have a listing of what their prices are and what
Hmm.
they're connected to, like detail-wise, effort-wise. I'm a huge supporter of artists and artists being paid what their work deserves. But I have a budget as a self-publish, and there was one particular cover artist that I approached who did have like a listing, and it was kind of expensive. But from the work that I had seen for her, I was like, this will be worth it. I think my biggest mistake with that one was that I didn't have a super clear idea of what I wanted for a cover. So I supplied them with like a few different ideas. But what they did send back to me wasn't really at all like it wasn't even close to what I thought anyway. Like it did have aspects of what I asked for, but at the same time it wasn't really what I was asking for. And that's partially my fault. I didn't have a clear vision, but when I talked to them about it, they weren't interested in working on it, so we parted ways.
Ah,
And I thankfully had a friend who made her own covers, and she quickly made one for me because I already had like plans to publish. My editing was done. Like this was the only thing really holding me back, and that was the big hurdle I wanted to get over, right? Like this fear of publishing, this fear of putting myself out there. So like I just wanted to do it and get it out there and pass that hurdle. So I published with that cover, and it was a beautiful cover. But when it came to the second cover, I realized I couldn't really ask her to do it again, and at the same time, I couldn't really find a cover that would match what she had created. So I went searching, and she actually found the cover artist, Selkie Designs, that I ended up hiring, and she's done both of the covers for me, and she's wonderful to work with.
yeah, they're lovely covers. And I think that's where having that community comes in is stuff like, yeah, when you're looking for a book cover and you're like, no idea where to even start, and then like that kind of stuff can kind of come with like recommendations. I find it are nicer than just going blindly to someone that you perhaps don't know whether it's going to be actually what you want it to be. Like you said, with your first experience, it wasn't great. It didn't turn out as you wanted, and it didn't sound like they were open to tweaking the design, and that's very frustrating. So it's what if there's anything that you would do differently? It sounds like for you that Tammy, actually the cover things come up. Gabby, you mentioned about going with a self-publishing company. You would do that differently. Does anything else stand out for you? Anyone that they would change about doing what they've published so far in their self-publishing journey?
So there is a part of me, there is this thing that a lot of people do where they will write the whole series first and then publish. And there is a part of me that kind of wishes I had done that, because it does
Right.
keep this momentum going when you're continuously coming out with a book. And I'm a slow writer. I I have my fast days. Like there are days where what this scene is just perfectly in my head and my fingers just fly across the keyboards. But those are rare. And I think a lot about my characters, and like there's this thing I need to happen. How would they actually do it based on their character traits and their personalities? Like how would they deal with it? This is how I would like them to deal with it, because that would be easy, but that's not them. So I'm gonna have to figure that out. And then there's the reaction to that scene. How are people going to react to that scene? So I think too much. I know there are authors that are like really good at just doing it, but I just think way too much.
Yeah, we can be our own worst enemies at times, right?
Yeah, Lucy and I try and we've been trying to use the technique where you just, I mean, it's not easy for everyone, but where you just write and then we leave gaps and just write a note to yourself and say, right, come back to
Yeah.
that because I've got the next scene in my head, but I
Question
can't
mark?
get from A to B. Yeah. So there's been some weird notes, but I personally find that's working quite well. I can get a novel just bashed out, and then I can go back, and the first edit is almost like redrafting.
Yeah.
So that's something I
That
use.
is what I do too, but I would say the first draft is the worst for me. I love editing. It's writing the first draft that I find.
What about you, Katie? Is there anything you do differently about self-publishing?
I think for my first fantasy book, I would have loved to have done a cover reveal like with more people. The first time I actually did like an actual like cover reveal with other bloggers and book people was for my fantasy western novella last year, and that seemed to like really help the pre-order sales. It was one of my better ones, so at least I wish I had done that coordinating release information earlier. For my first book, I think that would have helped like with the hype of it, but I'm also grateful it didn't work that way because of all the issues I had with the Amazon publishing that weren't my fault in the beginning, because it was stuck in limbo. The paperback was stuck in limbo, and they didn't know why it was stuck there. So it was like I was glad that not a whole lot of people had pre-ordered it or knew about it. So the fact that it just didn't launch quite as I wanted it to kind of helped with that. So that, and then also probably what Tammy said of like maybe having the first two books written and done, so I could have like released those two and then just kind of sat on the third, because right now like we're going on 4 years and I'm working on book two. It's hopefully going to come out this year if I can get to finishing it and sending it off for edits, because that's the other thing. It was just like making sure I have enough funds for the edits and everything else that needs to happen, because it is a larger book, unfortunately. So they always add up. But yeah, probably utilizing the book community a little bit more for pre-order launches and cover reveals, and then having my sequels lined up so I could just like get those out so people can stop asking me, when the second book coming out? When's the second book coming out? Like it's somewhere between George R. R. Martin and Office, but it'll probably be quicker than that. But yeah, I'm also a slow writer for the things I need to write, because I get distracted with other book ideas, which is how Hills of Heather and Bone happened, and then my fantasy western Wild Skies. It was like I was supposed to be working on book two, but then other books happened. So at least they had stuff to read, just not the thing that they were necessarily wanting to read.
Yeah. What about you, Gabby? So can you tell us more about like your experience with that self-publishing company? Like what's the difference you're finding now that you've taken back control and are going to go down self-publishing route for yourself?
Well, I think the big difference was that they took my money. They took my money, and then they didn't provide the support that I thought they were supposed to provide. Right? As a self-publisher, you're doing all of your marketing, you're doing all your edits, you're doing all of that by yourself. And then I thought this self-publishing company, they would take my money and then kind of guide me through it. But there wasn't much guidance. They took my money and then kind of like waited for me to do all the things I was supposed to do as an indie author anyway. So I was very disappointed with that structure. And then I had regrets over it because like I just spent all this money. I mean, my book got out and people bought it, but I felt incomplete. Like it felt kind of wrong. There wasn't a launch per se. There wasn't really like a cover reveal. I didn't even know ARGA readers were a thing until after, or even what beta readers were. Like there was nothing for me, and they gave me no guidance. And they're like, well, you can read this that we have. I'm like, that's not helpful. I need someone to sit here and tell me exactly what I need to do, or don't help me at all, right? Like, so I kind of felt like it was a waste of money, but I mean, I spent the money and then learned on my own. So I mean, like, I don't know how to say this nicely. It was more like I learned my lesson the hard way, I guess. And unfortunately, that's just sometimes that happens to people, and you grow from it. And I think this relaunch that I'm doing for Solon will be much more aligned with how I feel. I mean, it's going through a whole bunch of re-edits because I wasn't even happy with the edits that I had before. There's just like it's not a whole new book, but just like a fresh start. right? That's how I
Yeah.
feel about it. And I'm just like Katie. I didn't have book two ready, and then I got it out, and I'm like, now what? People are asking me for book two. I'm like, oh, I guess maybe I should have done one, two, and three, or one and two, or something, just so that you're not like lost in the dust. Because once someone's done reading, they're done reading, and you're kind of on the TBR because there's nothing for them to go, oh, I need to go get there and get to the second one, or I need to go through it and find out what happens. There isn't really that kind of drive, and I feel like I'm just stuck on some people's shelves, and that's okay too. Like, that just happens if you're a mood reader or whatever. But yeah, just like Katie, I wish I wrote two right away.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I wish I'd done that too. Like, I had my sci-fi book, and it went with a small press publisher, but I wish I'd had the second book ready to kind of go as well. But then with I'm writing some crime novels at the moment, and I'm doing that. So I've written the first one, but I won't do anything with it until I've got at least the second one written, and then yeah, like you said, you've got momentum, haven't you? But yeah, I wish I'd done the same. I wish I'd had more in the bank, so to speak, ready to go.
Yeah.
I just like to say, like, the anger I feel just from you telling your story. Like, there are so many authors out there who or want to be authors. They haven't been published yet. They want to be, and they do know about vanity presses, and they choose to do that. Like, there are people out there who do that, um, or they have no idea. They have no idea what a vanity press is, and um, I got told about them. I was lucky. We had a writers group in my high school. The teacher told us all about them, told us to watch out for them. They're predators. They're there to take your money. They're not, once they have your money, they're not interested in promoting you in any way because they already got theirs. But not everyone knows about that. And you have to do a lot of research about the company too. There's reviews for them. Should be, if there aren't any, don't. It's just, there are people who always want to take advantage of creatives.
Very frustrating. It's I think that they also kind of prey on this, and I've got this from what everyone said actually, this sense of urgency that you have once you've written a book. Like, I want to put this out in the world. I mean, that's part of why none of us waited to have written the second book before releasing the first in a series, because there's just like a sense of accomplishment, I think, when you write a book. Of course there is, it's amazing. And then you're like, I'm going to put this out there and this is going to be the best thing ever. And then it's kind of a bit of a anticlimax because you put that book out and then, like I say, people are asking for the second book and you're like, oh, yeah, I need to write that, right? And so that's like another year plus, depending on how quickly you can write and get it turned around. But I think, hindsight is one of those things. Yeah, we can learn from this going forward, but actually, this is all part of the learning curve of being an author, self-publishing your works, working out what the best kind of structure is for your publishing schedule.
So, saying that, would any of you still consider traditional publishing as a route for future books?
I would like to say yes, because I know like some indie authors who have been picked up by traditional publishing. It seems easier once you already have like your market and your book out. So I mean, you've done all the hard work for the traditional publisher. Now you just have their resources. So I feel like in the case of like Ryan Cahill, Evan Winters, LL Wang, of even like Jonathan French and some other bigger named indies who now become or getting picked up by traditional publishers. You've already got like the work there. So especially if it's like completed, I feel like that's easier because then there's not the expectation of like, now I have to write something new that fits like what the traditional publisher is. Because again, I understand like they're trying to get something that sells and they're using their own kind of like formula and maybe taking a little chance on some new stuff. But at least like the people who already have works that the agents are now interested in, it's like, hey, this is what it is. We can maybe improve on it just a little bit, but it's like, this is what it is. So I feel like for like my standalone, or if I have a completed series, I would be more interested if a traditional publisher was like, hey, we want to like publish this. But for newer works, like with my trilogy currently, it's like, I don't know if I would want a traditional publisher to pick it up until it's finished, just because I can't write to like their deadlines and stuff, and obviously there's contracts involved and money involved, and I'm like, that's a little bit too much pressure. So one of the main reasons I like being indie is like no one is disappointed except for me. So if I do not meet my deadline, it's not thousands of dollars in contracts being unmet, so I can still go at my own pace and then adjust from there. But yeah, I think for certain books that I have, I would love to see it traditionally published, and reach a further audience.
If that was on the table, that would be a fun journey to experience. Again, like, same as Katie, if it was a full trilogy that I was finished, or if I had a standalone that I was like, I could take a chance on that and then throw it to a query or something. Yeah, I think that would be a very fun journey to have, just to see what that side of traditional publishing is like, you know, find out what they're looking for, learn from them. It would be a really great learning experience.
Tammy?
So I've thought about it. I guess it would depend on the book. Most publishers who come for self-published works to publish themselves, they do it because they see the numbers and they think, ooh, I want some of that. So your book, first of all, has to do really well for them to be interested in publishing it. I've thought about it in terms of if I wrote something that I thought a publisher might be interested in, maybe I'd do that. The thing with self-publishing is that a lot of people choose to go that route because there is this belief within the publishing houses that certain stories aren't marketable, which is, it's an interesting approach. I would say that I think it comes down to the kind of numbers they want. So they try to purchase manuscripts that have what they think is a broad readership base. So the more interesting storylines that you see in self-publishing, you're not necessarily going to see in trad publishing because they don't think they can sell it. But when they see that someone has managed to figure out how to sell it, that's when they're interested. They're not interested in figuring it out themselves. They're interested in someone else doing the work, and then trying to get some benefit from that work already done.
Yeah.
That's true. It's of course there's always going to be a level of gatekeeping, right, in traditional publishing that is just not the case for self-publishing, and with what's going on in the US at the moment as well, it's likely that the traditional publishing landscape is going to just be completely changed by that, perhaps made harder, whether that means that US authors will be looking to UK-based publishers and they're just going to be inundated with more manuscripts. You know, ultimately it was always, I can't remember the percentage of getting picked up by an agent and then let alone then the publisher as well. I think it's tiny, right? Like 1% or less. And I don't know about everyone else, but for me, the querying process is just
Horrible.
Is a real, yeah, it's a drain. It's mentally exhausting. Makes you lose your mind a little bit. I had to like physically stop myself from refreshing my inbox every 5 minutes just to, you know, and it's, if you can take that away and not do that, then that makes life a lot easier. And it's also, it means that you're not losing energy that could otherwise be focused on your writing and, you know, promoting yourself.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not having to write to fit what's popular as well. I think at the moment I don't know, I don't really read it, but a lot of romance is very popular. And while that's great, people love that, that's fine. It's not what I personally want to write. And because I don't fit that slot, then you're not wanted. And I don't like that idea.
Yeah, and in my writers group, there's 7 of us. One of us got picked up by Titan, so her book's coming out in July. So that's been interesting, just hearing how that process has gone, you know, the frustrations, the excitements, all those things. But then like just listening to the others who are querying their works, just knowing like some agents won't even look at your book if it's more than a certain word count. And I'm like, that seems so limiting. Like just to say, oh, it has to be within this word count. It has to be within this word count. So it's, I mean, one, I kind of get it, but then also at the same time, like that just feels very limiting for a book. If you're like, oh, if it's more than 115 for a YA adventure novel, it's like that seems like, you know, you're not looking at a whole lot of things that could be potentially good. So it's just been interesting to see like how querying has kind of changed. And for me, I'm like, well, I'm so glad I'm not doing that part. But I think, you know, it can be its own gatekeeping for traditional publishing. So, but it is always exciting when I know people who like get picked up, but then also just to hear the stories from other published authors who have been picked up, like their frustrations too. So it's like, it's neither one's going to be perfect, but I think it's like, if you're willing to compromise, then traditional publishing is probably going to be the best route for you. If you're just wanting it to get out there with an agent, then it's about whatever route you choose and what you're willing to put into that adventure along the way, I feel.
I know even if you have a publisher, they still expect you to do a lot of marketing and a lot of self-promotion. And I think people think, oh, I've got an agent and publisher, and then that's it. You don't do anything else. It just happens. But it doesn't. Like, I know a lady who was picked up by Penguin, and she still has to organise all her own stuff, still had to push her book. It's, you know, for, I don't know how much she got for it, but, you know, you do it yourself and you know what sells and you know what works. But yeah, she still has to do it. Same.
Yeah. I think that was definitely a misconception, isn't it, of thinking you get picked up by a big publisher, then your book's going to sell, that's it. But actually, they focus their marketing on the top already famous authors who don't need that marketing, right? They should they've already got their readership, which is frustrating to see. If you know that's going to be the case anyway. Of course, self-publishing, we have to kind of acknowledge that comes with a level of downside, being the upfront cost, right? And that's something not everyone can afford to put in. And yes, there are things that you can save on. Like, I made the cover for my second book because I just couldn't. I had to choose between paying for a cover and editor, and I thought cover can be changed later. I'd rather polish the book up and pay for an editor and get that done. But it's, not everyone can afford that at all. But that's why I think the value comes in, that we've already seen, knowing other authors, whether you meet them on social media or whatever, people then can offer help, and whether that be like proofreading for you, beta reading, whatever. That's helping to polish the book. It's not, it's not the same as having an editor, but it's something. It's moving it closer to it being finalized.
Yeah, definitely. So is there any advice that you'd give to anyone who is looking to self-publish? Any of top tips?
Definitely find the indie community for sure, because I don't think I really found it until after I'd entered Spiffbo, the self-published fantasy blog off in 2021. No, 22. So that's when it really took off for me to find an indie community, and someone else had to invite me to the Discord. And some of these people who I've known for years, I'm I don't remember really kind of how we found each other, but we did. And it's been so good just watching some of them finally get books out, or, have advice that I wouldn't have thought of that. Thank you so much for help in that area. But yeah, finding a good community, because that can open gateways to editors, cover artists, audiobooks, everything else. I think even with getting your book into physical stores, there were some people who did interviews and it was oh my gosh, that's how you do it. That's cool. So then getting to reach out to them, just hear their experiences. Because not everything that they do is going to work for you, but at least it's somewhere to go of how to ask the right questions of how do I do this, this, and this. So yeah, finding the community, I think, has been my biggest advice and biggest blessing in this journey.
Yeah, and I would say to anybody who wrote a book and wants it out, wait, chill out for a sec. Let it breathe, and then start working on your second one while you find someone to make your best friend. Because I wish I had a book bestie to help me publish the first one, and help me go through the edits, and help me beta, and help me arc, and help me figure out all this stuff. And everyone that I've met so far in the indie community is so helpful and so nice. So just chill. It's okay. You did a great job writing a whole book. It's okay. Just wait. Your book deserves the love that you've given to it, and other people should love it the same way that you've loved it, right? So it'll have its time, I promise.
Yeah.
Recommendation for someone just getting into it would probably be do your research. make a plan. It doesn't have to be a timeline, just like a plan about how you want to come at your publishing journey. Figure out, talk to other people if you are unsure how to get an editor or a cover artist. See if they can suggest someone to you or suggest a resource that can point you in the right direction. A lot of that stuff I did myself, but like I said, I did meet some people in my community who had done it before, and they did give me some pointers on things, so that was wonderful. And if you feel like you're approaching burnout, which is an issue in writing, and it is something I've struggled with, just take a step back, play some video games, read some books, watch some movies, binge a show. You don't have to write every day. You don't have to write in all of your free time, which is what I did to myself for my first book. All of my free time had to be at the computer, trying to get words down, and I don't recommend it.
Yeah, I'm totally there, Tammy. Like, you have that horrible feeling of guilt if you're not writing, and like trying to stop that is a real battle. I'm getting there, and like I'm allowed to have downtime. I'm allowed to have days where my brain is literally just a mess, and I'm not going to be able to write anything. Sometimes I still try and push through that. It's just pointless. I should have just put the TV on and put the laptop away. But yeah, I think that's again where we can be our own worst enemies in feeling like you have to be productive, you have to be writing all the time. Actually, I don't know about everyone else, but I find the best ideas tend to pop into my head when I'm not focusing on the writing. I'll just be doing something else. Sometimes very inconvenient things like driving, where I literally can't write down, so I'm like, don't forget. But yeah, your brain really benefits from actually switching off on that intentional writing time.
It's always bedtime. Just as you're getting into bed. Always.
Yep. Shower, and right as I'm getting into bed, I'm like, cool. Gotta scribble something down.
Yeah, always. And I think knowing that you can reach out to people in the author community, not being afraid to ask other authors, is something that people need to remember. Like, most people are happy to talk to you and to give you advice, and also to not compare yourself to other authors. Like, I haven't sold any books this month, and that's okay. Someone might have sold 100, and that's fine. Like, everyone's journey is different.
Cool. I feel like that brings us to a nice conclusion point, isn't it? So yeah, thank you for joining us, everyone. So if we'll go around, can you let us know where we can follow you, stay up to date with your latest releases? I mean, do you want to start?
You can find me on Instagram at @Kavanaugh, and I'm also on Threads, same at @Kavanaugh. I'm thinking about joining Blue Sky. I will try to have the same.
Cool. Katie?
You can find me at KE Andrews on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, kind of still, just kind of hanging around. Blue Sky. I do have a newsletter as well. Just whatever random updates are happening. Yeah, still working on my book too. So mostly my newsletter is just writing updates and then what I'm reading and other fun things.
Thank you. And Gabby?
Chmilar.author on Instagram and Threads. Yeah. And I'll just keep everyone updated with the relaunch and the sequel coming out, because that's almost done too, so thank God.
Super. And is everyone's books available on Amazon, or is there anywhere specific that you'd rather people went to buy your book?
Mine, I sometimes have copies in my Etsy shop, but Etsy's just for US right now. I'm slowly trying to make my books wide for ebooks, but most of them can be found wide. My poetry, my short stories, and my novella are wide. But yeah, through Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Ingram Sparks, you can buy directly from there as well. And I think 2 of mine are on the Broken Binding. I think Hills of Heather and Bone and The Assassin of Grins and Secrets are on there as well. So if you're UK based, they're there.
They're available paperback and ebook on Amazon only at this time. And they're also in KU, so if you have a subscription, you can just download it and read it at your leisure. And I don't know when I'll have a hardback or if I will go wide. That's something that's I think I'll think about when I finish the series.
Yeah, I don't have them out yet. I pulled everything back, so I haven't quite decided where I'm going to be selling my books. So Solon will be coming out this year. I don't know when, but it will be relaunched this year. And haven't decided if it's just on Amazon or if it will be wide. I'll let you guys know. Just follow me on Instagram.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Follow us on Instagram at Introverted Indies, and be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel to stay up to date with the latest panel or author interview or reading. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us.